What did the quiet kid do that made everyone cry? Her name was Sarah, and she had been the quiet kid in my 5th grade class for the entire year. Quiet in this context meant more than not talking. Sarah did not participate. She did not raise her hand. She did not volunteer answers even when she knew them, and I could see from the desk behind her that she knew many of them. She existed as a fixed point of observation, who had decided early in the year to be present without being visible, and who had executed that decision with the consistency of a 10-year-old who had developed a strategy and was sticking to it. Our teacher, Mrs. Kenner, had been teaching for 31 years and was retiring at the end of that year. On the last day, she had us come to the front one at a time and give her something: a card, a drawing, a goodbye. It was optional. I had written a letter. Marcus drew a picture. Priya brought a plant. She thanked each of us and was trying not to cry. Sarah did not go up. The line moved and Sarah stayed at her desk. When the last of us had gone and Mrs. Kenner was preparing to move on, Sarah stood up. She walked to a specific spot near Mrs. Kenner's desk. She opened a folder I had not seen her carry before. She took out a piece of paper. She held it as a reference. She said, "Mrs. Kenner, I want to tell you some things about what you did this year that you might not know." The class went still. She said, "On September 14th, you asked me if I had eaten breakfast." She said you asked quietly at my desk while everyone else was taking a quiz. She said I had not. She said you gave me a granola bar from your drawer and did not make it a thing. She said you have given me a granola bar on 22 other days this year. She said you somehow knew which days. She said on October 9th I was crying in the bathroom and you came in. She said you did not ask me why. She said you sat on the floor next to me. She said we did not talk. She said I was in there for 11 minutes and so were you. She said you went back to class when I was ready. She said on November 3rd you stopped calling on me. She said you also kept including me. She said you would say, "Sarah, I was just thinking about what you might say," and then go on to the next person. She said it gave me practice being included without being on the spot. She said on December 12th my mom came to pick me up and you knew it was a bad day because you saw my mom's face through the window. She said you held me back to clean erasers for 10 minutes. She said you made it look like a job. She said by the time I went to the car my mom was calmer. She said you did that. She said on January 22nd you somehow knew I did not know an answer and you called on Marcus instead. And then later you asked me the question privately at my desk so you could write that I had participated. She said she had participated 16 times that way this year, even though she had raised her hand 0 times. She said she counted. She said there were more things. She said she had a list of 41 specific things Mrs. Kenner had done for her this year that Mrs. Kenner had not told anyone about, and that Sarah had noticed each one and had been keeping track since September because she wanted Mrs. Kenner to know at the end of the year that she had been seen. She said Mrs. Kenner had spent the entire year seeing her without letting Sarah know she was being seen, and Sarah wanted to return the gift. She said, "I do not know if I am doing a good job of this speech. I wrote it down to help me. I think what I am trying to say is thank you." She put the paper down. She walked back to her desk. Mrs. Kenner was crying openly. The class was crying. I was crying. Marcus was crying, and Marcus did not cry. The entire class of 5th graders was crying in their seats. Mrs. Kenner walked over to Sarah's desk. She kneeled down so they were at the same height. She said, "Sarah, I am very glad you were in my class this year. I am very glad it was my last." Sarah said, "Me too." Mrs. Kenner said, "Can I hug you?" Sarah said yes. They hugged for a long time. The bell rang. Nobody moved. She said softly, "Please go." We went, slowly. She looked at each of us the way she had apparently been looking at Sarah all year, completely. The next morning, I walked back to the school. Summer had started. The building was mostly empty, but the front doors were open because teachers were still cleaning out. I walked to Mrs. Kenner's classroom. She was packing boxes. The walls were bare where posters had been, little rectangles of brighter paint. I stood in the doorway. She looked up. She did not seem surprised. I said, "Mrs. Kenner, how did you know which days Sarah had not eaten breakfast?" She stopped packing. She sat on the edge of her desk the way she used to sit when she was about to explain something that mattered. She said, "I watched her hands. On the days she had not eaten, her hands were still. On the days she had eaten, her hands moved. That was all." I said, "That is not all." She said, "No, but it was where it started." Then she said something she told me she had not told anyone. She said, "Sarah's mother is going through something very hard. I cannot tell you what because it is not mine to tell. But what Sarah did yesterday was not just a speech. It was a girl telling an adult that she had been safe in this room. That is different from a thank you." I said, "I did not do anything for Sarah this year." Mrs. Kenner said, "You sat behind her. You never made fun of her. You never drew attention to her when she did not want it. You were safe too." I said, "That does not feel like enough." Mrs. Kenner said, "It never does. That is how you know you are paying attention." I went home that night and wrote one sentence in a notebook. Sarah counted 41 things. I sat behind her all year and I counted 0. It was the first time I had looked at myself and felt like I had missed something important. Not something in class. Something about being a person. I had watched Sarah the way you watch weather. Mrs. Kenner had watched Sarah the way you watch someone you are responsible for. That was different. Sarah's speech lived in me the way a song lives in you after you hear it at exactly the right time. Not the kind you play on repeat, but the kind that changes what all other music sounds like. I became a person who noticed a specific kind of thing. The quiet kid. Every classroom I walked into, I found them. Because Sarah had taught me what to look for, and Mrs. Kenner had taught me that finding them was the first step. In sophomore year, I noticed a boy named Nathan who sat alone at lunch every day. Same table, far corner. He ate, looked out the window, got up and left. He did not look sad. He looked decided, like Sarah. On the 4th week, I picked up my tray and sat at his table without asking. I did not say anything. He said, "Can I help you?" I said, "No, I just didn't want to eat alone today." He said, "You have friends." He nodded at my usual table. I said, "Today I wanted to sit here." Every Wednesday, I sat at Nathan's table. Sometimes we talked, mostly not. By the end of the semester, he was eating with my group. One day, walking out of the cafeteria, he said, "You are the only person who sat down without asking me what was wrong." I said, "Nothing was wrong." He said, "Exactly. Nothing was wrong." Mrs. Kenner had not sat on that bathroom floor because something was wrong with Sarah. She sat because Sarah was a person in a room and Mrs. Kenner was a person in the same room, and that was enough. I became a teacher. 5th grade. I stood in front of 23 kids on my first day and searched for the quiet one. I looked at their hands and saw nothing. I saw kids holding pencils and drumming on desks. I did not see what Mrs. Kenner would have seen. It scared me. My mentor Braylon was kind but direct. After a day where a boy in the second row shut down during during math, stopped writing, stopped looking at the board, became a small person sitting still in a chair, and I had just kept teaching. Braylon pulled me aside. He said, "You froze." I said, "I didn't know what to do." He said, "What did you want to do?" I said, "I wanted to sit on the floor next to him and not say anything." He said, "Then why did you not do that?" I said, "Because I thought there was a correct procedure." He said, "There is. The correct procedure is to be a human being in the room with another human being. Everything else is paperwork." I had been treating Mrs. Kenner's gift like a method. Watch hands, give granola bars, sit on floors, but it was not a method. It was a way of being in a room with people. A decision made every day to see the person instead of the lesson plan. There was a girl turning in blank worksheets for 2 weeks. Not incomplete, blank. I asked her to stay after class. She stood by my desk with her face closed the way kids' faces get when they think they're in trouble. I did not ask what was wrong. I said, "I noticed you haven't been writing much lately. I wanted you to know I'm here and the worksheets can wait." Her face softened, one finger at a time, like a fist unclenching. She said, "My dog died." I said, "I'm sorry." She said, "Everyone says that." I said, "I know. I'm still sorry." She said, "Can I just sit here for a minute?" She sat for 8 minutes. We did not talk. The next day her worksheet was not blank, not finished either, but there were words, and that was enough. But the mistake matters too. There was a quiet boy in the back. He sat still. He did not raise his hand. I was sure he was carrying something. I pulled him aside the same way. He looked at me, not grateful, not relieved, confused. He said, "I'm fine. I just don't like talking. Some kids are quiet because they are carrying something. Some kids are quiet because they are quiet." Mrs. Kenner knew the difference. She knew which days to give a granola bar and which days to leave someone alone. I did not know the difference yet. I wrote in the blue notebook, "Mrs. Kenner knew the difference. I do not yet." Knowing you do not know is the first step, but it is not enough. I was 24, sitting in a coffee shop grading papers when I looked up for no reason and saw a woman at a table near the window. Her hair was longer, but her face had not changed. It was Sarah. My hands went still around the red pen. I thought about Mrs. Kenner watching Sarah's hands. On the days she had eaten, they moved. On the days she had not, they were still. And here I was, a 24-year-old whose hands had just gone still because a girl from 5th grade was sitting 20 feet away. I walked to her table. I said, "Sarah." She said, "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I said, "We were in Mrs. Kenner's 5th grade class. I was there for the speech." Her face changed, small, like when someone moves one piece of furniture and suddenly you can see the window that was always there. She said, "You were there." I said, "I sat behind you all year." She said, "I know. I remember your handwriting. You dotted your I's with circles." I said, "You noticed that?" She said, "I noticed everything. I just didn't say anything." I told her the thing I had been carrying for 14 years. I said, "Your speech is why I became a teacher." She was quiet for a long time. She said, "That is a lot to tell someone in a coffee shop." I said, "I have been waiting 14 years to say it." Then she said, "Can I tell you something? The list was not 41 things." I said, "What?" She said, "It was actually 63. I cut it down because I couldn't get through all of them. I practiced the speech every night for 2 weeks. I picked the 41 I could say without my voice breaking. The other 22 were too much." I said, "What were the other 22? Sarah said, "They were the days she touched my shoulder when she walked past my desk, just lightly, just enough for me to know she was there. I counted every one, 22 times." I could not say that out loud because if I had said the word shoulder, I would have fallen apart. I said, "The granola bar." Sarah said, "The granola bar is the one I think about the most." I said, "Me too." Sarah said, "I've never told anyone about the granola bar." I said, "Me neither." She said, "Not even your partner?" I said, "Not even." She said, "That feels right. It is our thing." Then Sarah said, "My mom Madeline was going through the worst year of her life that year. Mrs. Kenner didn't just see me. She saw my mom through a window on December 12th and held me back to clean erasers so my mom could have 10 minutes to pull herself together." Mrs. Kenner never told my mom she had seen her. She said, "My mom found out years later when I showed her the full list, all 63 things." My mom called Mrs. Kenner, a retired teacher she had never spoken to, and Mrs. Kenner picked up. And my mom said, "You saw me through a window and you saved my daughter from seeing me at my worst." Sarah said, and Mrs. Kenner said, "I did not save anyone. I cleaned erasers." I was crying. Sarah was crying. We were sitting in a coffee shop and nobody around us knew why, and that felt exactly right because that was always how Mrs. Kenner did it, quietly, without making it a thing. We became friends. Mrs. Kenner is 82. We visited her together. She answered the door and said our names without hesitation. She remembered the speech. She remembered the granola bars. She said, "Sarah, I have told that story in every classroom I have volunteered in for 14 years. You are in classrooms you do not know about." Sarah cried. I cried. Mrs. Kenner cried. We were exactly where we were supposed to be. I drove home that evening and opened the blue notebook to a new page. I wrote, "Things I have done this year that I hope someone is counting." I stared at the page. I did not write anything else, but the page was open, and I was paying attention.